Hi and welcome to my Python YouTube channel. It's awesome to have you here. If you like this video, a thumbs up would be great. And make sure to subscribe for future videos. I also have a blog at prosperacoder.com with lots of cool stuff, so feel free to check it out. In the previous part of the series, we listed all the Kivy layouts and mentioned briefly the rules of positioning widgets inside layouts. Now we're gonna talk in more detail about widget size and position in layouts. You can also read the written version of this video on my Python programming blog at prosperacoder.com. Let's start with the first layout, the float layout. It works in a similar way as when we created our custom widgets. The difference is in how widgets inside the float layout, and actually inside other layouts as well, are scaled and positioned. This is the subject of this part. What we're going to do now is write code that uses a float layout with a custom button in it. To demonstrate how the properties used for sizing and positioning work, though, let's use just the button first. This time we're going to use the size hint property instead of size to set the widget size. Suppose the button should occupy 30% of the window in horizontal direction and 10% in vertical direction. These percentages should be expressed as 0.3 and 0.1 respectively. We're also going to use the pass hint property instead of pass. The pass hint property must be assigned a dictionary with the x, right, y, and top values specified. Naturally, only up to 2 of them should be specified at any given time. X or right for the horizontal position, and y or top for the vertical position. What are the 4 properties? X is the left border of the widget. Right is the right border of the widget. Y is the bottom border of the widget. Top is the top border of the widget. The values for each of these properties are in the range from 0 to 1. For example, if x is set to 0, it means the left border. If it's set to 1, it means the right border. And if it's set to 0.3, it's 30% into the window from the left border. The other properties work the same. To make it clearer, let's use different combinations of the size hint and pass hint properties. If you run the program after each change, you will quickly see how they work. The content of the float layout will be defined in the Kivy file, so in the Python file, we're only going to return a float layout without bothering what there is in it. This is why the Python file will be the same for each of the examples below. What is going to change is the Kivy file. So, the Python file is here. We'll be using the float layout, so we have to import it. And now you're going to return the float layout. We'll define it in the Kivy file. So let's start with some basic examples. In the first couple examples, we're not going to bother with position, we're only going to set the widget size. This means the default position will be assigned, which is the bottom left corner. Now let's set the widget size with the size hint property. Here's the Kivy file. Here we have our float layout and the button with the text "Press Me." Now the button should occupy 50% of the window in both horizontal and vertical direction. So 50% in horizontal direction, 50% in vertical direction. Now if you run the program, you will see the button indeed occupy 50% of the screen in each direction. 50%, 50%, even if you resize the window. The button will always occupy 50% in each direction. And now we want the button to occupy the whole width of the window and 30% of its height. So the button should occupy 100% of the window in horizontal direction, which means 1, and 30% in vertical direction. Let's save, and here it is. 100% in horizontal direction, 30% in vertical direction. Finally, let's make the button fill the whole window. Actually, it will fill the whole float layout, which itself fills the whole window. Here's the code. The button should occupy 100% in both horizontal and vertical direction. So 1, 1. Save. Run. As you can see now, the button occupies the whole float layout and the whole window. Now the size hint property is set to a tuple of two values, one for scaling in horizontal direction and the other in vertical direction. But sometimes you may want to scale a widget in just one direction. Then you can use the size hint X or size hint Y property, depending on which direction you need. Let's scale the button only in horizontal direction first. So here we'll change this property to size hint X for horizontal direction, and now we just need one value, 0.8 for example, which means 80% in horizontal direction. Let's save, let's run, and now the button occupies 80% in horizontal direction, and it occupies the whole available space in vertical direction. And now let's scale it only in vertical direction, so we need the property size hint Y, and let's set it to 0.15 for example. Save, and here it is, 15% in vertical direction, even if we resize. Always 15% in vertical direction. Now that you know how to scale the widget, let's experiment with its position. As you know, the default position is at the coordinate 0, 0, which is at the bottom left corner. Now let's try out all the four properties that we listed before: X, right, Y, and top. We're even going to learn two more properties in a minute. First, horizontal positioning. Vertical positioning works pretty much the same, as you will see a bit later. And the first property is the X property. Now let's modify our Kivy file so that there are three buttons. We want each button to have the same size, so we can define a custom button. So here's our custom button. With size hint set to 0.2, 0.1, which means 20% in horizontal and 10% in vertical direction. And now we can use our custom buttons. So here's our first custom button. Here's our second, and here's our third custom button. Let's change the text to 1, 2, and 3 respectively. And now we want the X property to be set to 0, 0.5, and 1. Remember that X is the left border of the widget, so the left border of the button in our case. If you don't set either the Y or the top property, vertical position will default to Y equals 0. And now let's specify the X property. So we need the pass hint property here, pass hint, which is a dictionary, and in the dictionary we have to specify one or two of these properties, X, Y, top, or bottom. Let's specify X then. X, this is the key, and the value should be 0. This is how we use the pass hint property. So this means the left border of the button should be on the left. Now let's copy this and change the values for the other two buttons. Here and here. Let's make it 0.5 and let's make it 1. Now here the left border of the button is in the middle of the width of the container. And here, the left border of the button is on the right border of the container, which means the button itself is outside the container. Now, let's run this program. Let's save, run. Okay, here is what we have. Here x is 0, so the left border of the button is on the left border of the container. Here x is 0.5, which means 50%. Now here the left border of the widget of the button is 50% away from the left border of the screen of the container. And now the third button begins here because its x value is set to 1, which means the right border of the container. So the button itself is over here, outside this container. Here you can see an image, a slide, where this is explained visually. Now, if you set the x value to a value outside the range from 0 to 1, the button or part of it will be outside the window. By setting it to a negative value, the button will be moved to the left. If you set it to a number greater than 1, it will be moved to the right. Finally, by setting it to a number close to 1, the right part of the button will be outside the window, etc. Have a look. Now, here we have the 3 buttons that we just defined. And now let's say our first button should be outside the window on the left, completely outside the window. So let's set its x value to -2. Now, as far as the second button is concerned, the left part of the button should be outside the window on the left. So let's make it -0.1. And the third button, here, the right part of the button should be outside the window on the right. So let's make it 0.9. Now, let's run it. As you can see, the first button is outside the container. We don't see it. The second button is partially outside the container on the left and partially in the container. And the third button is partially in the container on the left, but the right part of it is outside the container. Now, the center X and right properties. Now, suppose you want the buttons to be positioned uniformly. Button 1 on the left, button 2 in the middle, and button 3 on the right. This would be difficult to achieve with just the X property, because you would have to take into consideration the weight of the button to calculate the position of its center and right border. This is where 2 other properties come in handy: the aforementioned right property for the right border of the widget, and the center X property for the center of the widget in horizontal direction. Let's see how we can use them. So, the first button should be on the left. So we just set X to 0. Now, the second button should be in the middle. So let's use the center X property instead of X. Center X, and this should be set to 0.5. Finally, the third button should be on the right. So let's use the right property instead of X. Right 1. This means here the left border of the button should be on the left. Here the center point of the button should be in the middle. And here the right border of the button should be on the right. Let's save, let's run. And here we have it. X for the first button on the left. Center X, which is over here in the middle. And here right, which is here on the right of the container. Here you can see it visually. And just one more example with the center X and right properties in action. Now, the first button, let's make it so that the right border of this button should be near the left border of the window, and part of the button will be invisible. So let's set right to 0.1. Now, as for button 2, here the right border of this button should be at the center of the window. So we use the right property and put it in the center. So the right border of the button will be in the center of the window, of the container, of the float layout actually. And now button 3, here the center of this button should be 75% away from the left border of the window. So when I say window, I mean the container, the float layout here. So the center X property should be 75% away from the left border of the window. And now let's save it and let's run it. And here it is. Let's have a look at the code again. Here, the right border is 10% into the window from the left. Now here, the right border of this button is in the middle of the window, and here the center point of the button is 75% into the window from the left. And here you can see a visualization again. Now what about vertical positioning? Now that you understand how the three properties X, center X, and right work, it'll be easier to understand how their counterparts in the vertical direction work. These are Y, center Y, and top respectively. In the following examples, we can omit the X, center X, and right properties in the passhand dictionary. Then the button will be placed at X equals 0, which is the default. We're going to only practice the vertical direction now. So have a look at this visualization to see how these properties work. So the property top refers to the top border of the widget, center Y refers to the center point of the widget in a vertical direction, and Y refers to the bottom border of the widget. And now let's have a look at this. Let's use the following properties. Top 1, which means the top border of the button should be on the top border of the container. Now here, center Y 0.5, which means the center point of this button should be in the middle of the container vertically. And here, let's use the Y property to set the position of the lower border of the widget, and let's put it on the bottom of the container, so we need 0 here. Now if we run this, we will see the three buttons positioned like here. Button 1, 2, and 3. Naturally, you can position widgets in both directions at the same time. Then you just have to set two properties in the passhand dictionary. Here's an example. Let's say the first button should be 10% from the left horizontally, and its top should be in the middle vertically. So, for the horizontal position, we need X to be set to 10% from the left border, and for the vertical position, we need top to be 50%. So the top border of the widget should be in the middle of the screen, vertically naturally. And now the second button. Here, the button should be in the center of the window, so both horizontally and vertically. So we just have to use the center X property, set it to 0.5, and the center Y property set to 0.52. And button 3, here the button should be on the right, so we need to set the right property to 1 and 20% above the bottom border of the container. So 20% like so. Y refers to the bottom border of the widget. Let's save. Let's run. And now we get this. Here you have a visualization to see better how it works. So we have the X property, which means the left border of the widget, which is 10% from the left. We have the top property, which means the top border of the widget of the button is in the middle of the screen vertically. Then you have the center X property, which means the center of the second button is in the middle of the window horizontally, and also center Y is set to 0.5, which means the center point vertically is also in the middle of the screen. Now the third button, the right property is 1, which means the right border of the button is on the right of the container. Y is set to 0.2, which means 20%. So the lower border of this button is 20% above the bottom border of the container. Well, these are the basics of scaling and positioning widgets in layouts, but there's more to it. You can also use the size and path properties in layouts. In the next part of the series, we'll have a look at some more advanced examples of scaling and positioning widgets in layouts. Okay, that's it for this video. If you like it, a thumbs up would be great. Also, make sure to subscribe for future videos. If you want to leave a comment or ask a question, you're welcome to do so. Thanks for watching.